Nobody wants to talk about the worst thing they ever did, all right? Nobody wants to talk about that.
I try to go in there and just be honest. Just be honest. That's all you can do.
I was hopeful that I was gonna be able to go home and be with my son and my mom.
You're being asked to relive a moment that you probably struggled with for a very long time.
Being frank, I was like scared. I figured it would be hostile.
You sit down and, think about, what could you say? What would you say?
My worst period of my life would not forever define me.
As a child, my dreams and aspirations were, I wanted to be an accountant. Numbers fascinated me at one point, and being able to get paid to take care of other people's money just was very appealing.
My fiance and I had plans of kind of doing like the happily ever after thing. We were kind of like twins, so to speak,
I thought at that time, growing up in the 60s, that I would become the next great Puerto Rican baseball player. But, that dream just kept getting dimmer and dimmer until it faded into nothing.
I was convicted of second-degree murder, and my sentence was 15 years.
18 years.
20 years to life.
25 years.
25 years to life.
A patrol car, they actually stumbled on us. And a gun battle ensued. And the police sergeant took a shotgun blast in his face. And he lost his eye vision.
Did a robbery, and in the course of the robbery, 2 people did get shot and 2 people died because of my reckless behavior.
I got arrested because my then boyfriend and I, both of us were crack cocaine addicts. We ended the life of my grandmother to fuel our addiction.
And I made a commitment then that would be it. I would never hurt another human being.
In '96, when I first went to the parole board, I felt that I was ready.
I'm anxious, I'm super nervous, but I'm hopeful because reading the guidelines for what can possibly get you out or grant you parole, I was asked to, 1, do anger management, 2, substance abuse treatment, 3, do a vocation, learn a skill, and 4, my time. The first 3 of which I completed before my first 5 years.
I had a master's degree. I'm a published poet. I was a published poet by that time.
I had multiple job offers. I was ready to go.
It was around Christmas time, and I said I may show up on my wife's doorstep for Christmas.
When I first got my denial letter, I was disappointed. The second time I got a denial letter, I was disappointed, I was hurt. The third time I got a denial letter, I was disappointed, I was hurt, I was angry.
Went back in 2002, denial again 2 years. 2004, 2006, 2008, 2009, 2011, 2013, and 15. What could I say? What could I do?
2009, 2011, 2013, with no other justification than the nature of the crime.
the nature of your crime, the one issue that you can never change.
Don't matter if you look at this crime 10 years, 20 years, 100 years from now, it's going to be the same. It's going to be ugly. It's going to be the same.
For the interview, it's impersonal. They sit you in a room, there's a big television in front of you, 3 commissioners sitting there, and you're talking to a television.
And each time, right out the gate, we had a discussion about the instant offense. Tell me, how do you take the life of somebody who was always there for you? Make me understand how it was just so easy for you to end her life. My jaw dropped. The tears started flowing. I couldn't get control of myself. I couldn't answer his question because I was so overwrought with guilt. At that time, I was with an abusive boyfriend. So anything he told me to do, pretty much I did. When he decided he wanted to get more money, he went into my grandmother's room and began to suffocate her. I walked in to see him doing this and was threatened with, if I don't help, my son was next, who was laying in the bed right next to her. I spent most of my time crying. I didn't feel comfortable talking to them, you know?
Most of my hearings were just focused on the crime. We did all that in court. The judge saw and heard everything that could possibly be said or heard about it. That was part of his considerations when he sentenced me to the minimum.
I had a commissioner named Ferguson twice. He's a former prosecutor. And he would conduct the hearing like he's interrogating somebody. This guy's doing your hearing. That's very disturbing.
You've come to prison because you were not acting like a human being on the outside. Now you're inside. We want you to act like a human being.
Ferguson was a pit bull. He told you straight up that he didn't like you. He didn't like what you were in jail for. And if he was straight to the point.
You have some individuals who are very cunning, who can sit there and BS you for 10 minutes, for 20 minutes, and tell you everything you want to hear. And if you don't have the experience, if you don't have the chops to assess someone who has perhaps dedicated their life to criminal activity, someone else may get raped or murdered. And that's your responsibility. I look at their demeanor, I listen to the sound of their crackling voice, I see perhaps tears in their eyes. Some are true tears, some aren't.
I said, have you considered the fact that during my incarceration, I've done X, Y, and Z? One time the commissioner picks up my file and goes, oh yeah, we read all that. Just flips through it like a phone book. Like, yeah, we read all that, and drops it back down the table and looks at me like, okay, now what?
In prison, some of us focus on changing who we are. You know, we're consumed with helping others make this same transformation. And for it not to have any value, when you go to a parole board, no value whatsoever. That almost enrages you, that they could be so callous.
You're in on a term of from 6 months to 10 years for assault with a deadly weapon?
Yes, sir.
And
The whole parole scheme was first invented in New York State.
Why is it that you didn't learn from your first incarceration?
So this is the epicenter for the system, and yet it's one of the worst now. I remember a time that parole was a fair system back in the 80s, but somewhere along the line it got into the punishment era.
Good to see you. Nice to see you. Want to shake things up here. How are you?
George Pataki practically rode into office on the backs of guys like me.
I will be putting before the legislature measures to eliminate parole for violent felons. Violent felons belong in jail.
They just started like blatantly just across the board denying parole for guys like myself.
During the Pataki administration, the release rates completely flip-flopped. If you had, let's say, 3 out of 4 who came before the board getting out, 3 out of 4 under Pataki stayed in. He did an absolutely brilliant job. The justice system cannot survive the hug-a-thug mentality, meaning you've had a bad childhood, let me give you a hug, now you can go free.
My kids, they just didn't think I was ever going to see me out. Seeing me in prison was it. There were times when I thought that I was never going to get released. I personally know men who are being hit by the parole board and they're in their 70s.
If you've been in prison for 20, 30 years, people are not a high risk to commit murder again or to commit arson again. The research is so clear on this and has been for years. What you might have been as an 18-year-old or a 17-year-old or even a 20-year-old is not the person sitting before you today as a 50-year-old, a 60-year-old, or a 70-year-old. And we are running geriatric institutions in America right now because we're not releasing people.
So people might say, oh, you know, you have to let them out, you have to let them out. That's the only thing that matters. No, it's not. I have members of the public who feel that the component of retribution has not been satisfied.
All I could think about was being able to see my son, my grandchildren, at least live some semblance of a life, because I grew up in prison.
After the first few boards, I stopped telling my wife I was going because it was just messing her up. You know, she'd get all excited and get ready for you to come home, and then you get denied. After about 6 boards, I stopped telling anybody I was going aboard. I would just go.
When you open up regularly and you're denied, it's kind of bulky because there's an appeal paper in there as well. So when I picked it up, I said, this is light. This is not bulky.
I'm looking in the envelope, I'm trying to feel around, make sure, well, is this real? There's no appeal? There's no appeal papers, no appeal papers?
I'm looking, it says, parole granted. But when I went to go look at my name, I couldn't read it. I was so in disbelief that this could not be happening to me. I have been waiting for this for so long that I had to go ask somebody else. Just do me a favor. Tell me whose name is on this piece of paper.
Was this real? Was it real?
I felt such a rush come through my body, like all the oxygen left my feet.
In the end, I appeared at 10 parole hearings. I ended up doing like double the minimum sentence.
My eligible release date was 1996, and I was released in 2018.
I had just turned 28 when I was arrested. And when I was released, I was 66 years old.
Why do you think you were eventually released?
I think the determining factor for me being released was the fact that a new commissioner was the lead interviewer in my case.
Jose spent his life organizing in prison to help other people. Nowhere else believes that you shouldn't be forgiven and that you don't have the right to move on just because you did something heinous at one fixed point in your life.
I left a lot of good men in prison, and some passed away. So, this is personal for me.
I have 4 grandsons. My biggest thing is that when I see them, I hug them for a really, really long time. And they get to the point where they're like, Grandma, Grandma. I'm like, okay, wait a minute.
I think the best part of being out is I get to be me boldly. Because before you be you too boldly, even if it's positive, there's a possibility you can get locked up.
I think the best part of probably being released, you're not telling people, not telling you to lock in, lock out, not telling you when you could eat, when you could sleep.
Most people don't even know I was incarcerated. Unless you tell them, they don't know you're incarcerated. They treat you like a regular person. So, I act like I always wanted to be. I'm the person I always wanted to be. I'm only better, and I'm getting better every day.
Thank you.